Hey everyone, thanks for joining me on the Travel Collective. Today I am talking to Lauren, and you can tell by her studio, I'm super excited. She loves wildlife, nature. I think we're going to have a lot in this episode to chat about. So, welcome, Lauren.
Well, thank you very much for having me on, April.
You're welcome. So, I noticed in the pre interview, you mentioned how much you love Florida, which I love that people enjoy and love and want to share what's right here in the United States. So, share about Florida, what you love about it, some of the experiences you've had.
Absolutely. So I currently live in Ohio, and my grandparents used to live in Florida in the Homosassa area that's over by kind of Tampa and Crystal River. And we would go every summer, and I absolutely loved going as a kid, and that just has not stopped. And what I love about Florida is that there are so many different types of environments to explore. Like Crystal River, for example, has this freshwater springs, and in the wintertime, hundreds of manatees come into the springs to stay warm. They can't be out in the ocean, they would freeze to death. And like Three Sisters Spring is a great place to see all these manatees. They're just so amazing to look at, so gentle. And then you've got the Keys, and you've got the coral reefs and sharks and sea turtles, and you've got places like that have caves with underwater springs. So I took my son to Blue Springs, and he got certified to dive there. And it's just, you can't get bored in Florida, I think. You
That's
get the
good,
Everglades,
yeah.
I mean, so much.
So it sounds like you have a love for the water too, and diving and swimming and exploring what's below the water.
Yeah, so I am a scuba diver. In my previous job, I was a dive safety officer. So we were in charge of taking care of the gear and training the volunteers. And being up close to animals that are much bigger than you and have big, sharp, pointy teeth, it sounds scary, but it's truly awe-inspiring. And it's just really cool to get to visit basically an alien planet. You're putting on all this gear, you're able to breathe in a place you wouldn't normally be able to breathe, and you get to visit their home for a little bit. So it's a lot of fun to go scuba diving. And we're also, my current job, I'm a drone pilot. So
Oh,
exploring from the air and exploring from the sea, I'm all about exploring all the different places.
oh, I love that. And so you do a lot of photography then too, both with the drone, and then do you do some underwater photography also?
Yes, I do have an underwater camera. We've got a couple like 360 underwater cameras, and I do have it's called an Olympus Tough, and it's a pretty decent camera. It's nothing like my wildlife camera that I use when I go to like Kate's Cove in Tennessee, or I'm out in the Everglades or something like that. Um, Anywhere I'm at, I have to have a camera with me because my least favorite thing to say is, "Oh, I wish I got a picture of that."
Yeah, I know. We all have those shots that got away that haunt us, as I call it, whether it's
Yes.
an animal or the way the sunlight's hitting something. Oh, I completely understand.
Yeah.
So, how long have you been doing the drone photography?
We started that, my husband and I, in 2020. So I was furloughed from my job because of the shutdown. And I decided in that couple month period, I didn't want to go back. Being out of that environment, I realized just how much I was missing at home and missing with my family. So starting our own business gave us a little bit more of that flexibility. And at the same time, my husband was retiring from the military, and we're almost 40, and we're sitting there looking at each other like, what now? Like, we thought we had
Yeah.
it out and we didn't. So I love taking pictures, and he loves geography and mapping and things like that. So we decided to kind of combine our talents, and we've been doing that for, like I said, 4 years now. And he's really gotten into FPV style, which is the first person view. And those are the kind where you can get really up close and tight and through windows and
Oh, wow.
zipping all around and stuff like that.
Oh, that's amazing. And there's so many uses for the drone photography. I mean, I know a lot of real estate agents now are using it to show, kind of give that overview to people. There's just, and just the look of it is so different, whether it's a forest or just the topography. We can see so much more than we ever could before.
Yeah, we have a realtor that is really good to us that helps us out in getting a lot of local jobs. And it really, we call it like the selfie angle. You know, you're bringing it up, you're really showcasing your house, and you're able to see all the great features that are around. So you can tell, like, oh, you know, you can see my house, but also behind my house, you can see, oh, there's the high school and the city is
Yeah.
close by. So it really gives you an idea of how close you are to everything.
Yeah, I think that is super, that's amazing. It's really important. So, talk a little bit about all of the art behind you. It looks like it's a mixture of like watercolor and pen and ink and
Yeah, so I've got the wildlife photography behind me, and gosh, I use a Sony for that and a 600 millimeter lens. So it's a pretty big and heavy lens, but I don't mind carrying it around. I've gone to Cades Cove by myself a couple times, me and my dog, Fiona, and she's the perfect dog. A husky is a perfect dog for that kind of environment because she doesn't bark at the bears when we see them. She just sits quietly in the car and I'm able to get my shots, but I do feel a little bit protected because she looks like a big wolf.
yeah, that would be helpful. Yeah.
Yes. So I have a little bit of safety while I'm out traveling. And it's just an incredible experience. It's a lot of patience, but you get to see animals in their natural environment and acting the way that you don't normally see animals acting, like if you're watching them at a zoo or um, maybe at a park or something where there's a lot of other people around. And I use a lot of my photographs as inspiration for my watercolor. So the hippo back there,
Yeah.
that is Fiona from the Cincinnati Zoo, speaking of zoos and stuff like that. So I got a picture of her, but in a picture like that, you can see the enclosure and things like that. So by taking the picture and then making it into a painting, you kind of just focus on the animal. And I do lots of fun, bright colors and splashes and things like that. And I've kind of upgraded my art to help other people in connecting with nature. So it's one thing just to have a pretty picture,
Yeah.
but I love taking people out. This morning, I took a group of teenage girls at the Grail in Loveland, and we did a nature journaling experience. So I gave them all the tools they need, explain what the process is. There's no right or wrong. It's just about connecting with nature and being present in the moment. And you know, it's teenage girls and I'm like, oh my gosh, they hate me, they
Yeah.
think I'm so weird,
Right.
they're like rolling their eyes and texting. And you know, it turned out at the end of it I couldn't get them out of the woods,
Really?
and they're
Oh.
like, oh, we want to keep doing this is so much fun. And they were talking about how much they want to start this practice on their own. So that to me is much more of a payoff than,
Oh.
you know, if somebody just buys my print. Like if they go and start creating on their own, that is amazing.
Well, and just spending that time kind of disconnecting from our devices, I think, is so valuable. Because I think a lot of us, I mean, whether we're young or old, I mean, we have all this technology now and all this stuff on the internet and movies and music and everything. But to just go and sit outside and just listen to the wind or watch the little bird or whatever it is, we really need to get back to some of that. I think it just centers us. I think it's super important.
Yes, absolutely.
So that is super rewarding taking the groups out. Do you take out different age groups? Is it usually teens or?
So I'm just getting started. So Wild Development Studio, I started in January. I was like, how do I take my photography I've been doing for years and years and my watercolors that I've been doing? And I had been doing another podcast, and I love the podcasting world, but it wasn't really a topic that I was interested in. So I'm like, how can I take all these elements and mush them together and make it something meaningful and kind of consistent throughout? So it was January when it was born, and it's wildlife art and adventures to inspire a desire to explore outside. And gosh, now I'm forgetting my point.
No, that's okay. It was what kind of how you're mushing everything together, like your love of the art, kind of some of the
Oh,
things I guess.
and the ages, yeah. Um, so just getting started. This was my third class today. I have done a couple with younger kids with the Loveland Learning Garden. And starting later this month, I've got an event called Earth and Easel, and people can come to the park and they can rent gear from me for free. And they go have their own art experience. I give them all the tools that they need, and then they just have to go sit out in nature. They have permission to just fully unplug and be creative and experiment. I mean, you never know what you can do until you try. And then they turn everything back in, and I get a picture of what they've created. So we started that today.
Oh,
Some
oh,
the girls I
cool.
was with today, they were kind of my guinea pigs for this Earth and Easel. And what's going to be really cool about this is it's going to keep building, and all these pictures are going to tell a story. All these drawings are going to tell a story of how people are interpreting this park. So I think it's a really
Right.
fascinating story.
Oh, I love that. Yeah. And then is there an outlet with the park or the community where you might be able to showcase some of what you're helping produce, so to speak, out there?
So I'm going to be posting that all up on my website. So thankfully, the park is called the Grail, and they are amazing enough to let me borrow their space. And so I get to borrow the space, and then all the artwork and stuff will live on my website. Maybe eventually they'll showcase it there. We can do some sort of gallery display or something like that.
Yeah, I think that's super powerful. And a lot of, and you probably know too from growing up and spending so much time with animals that even scientists sometimes want pictures of different behaviors of birds or sea life because they're, they're still trying to learn and study what's happening and how is the environment impacting it.
Yeah, absolutely. That's where like nature journaling definitely comes into play. There are some of the first people to notice changes in the weather, or maybe we're thinking that the weather's changing a lot. And I was talking to a nature journalist out in the Rockies, and she's like, people were talking about how they thought that winter was so long this year. And she said that based on her calculations and the temperature of the river and stuff by her, it was almost the same exact date as it was last year. And I'm like,
Oh,
that's interesting, but I always think winter takes forever because I
yeah,
just
I think,
like
yeah.
that.
Well, being in the Midwest, I grew up in the Midwest, so yeah, it just seems like it just all the gray days, all the cold, it just kind of, yeah, it just kind of
Drags on.
drags on. Yeah. So talk
Absolutely.
a little bit about some of your other travel experiences.
Oh goodness, where do I start? Right, do you want to talk about the catastrophes?
Yeah, I know. It's like you've had some really things that kind of shake you, that kind of implore that people should have some skills if they go out on their own, or always take a buddy. I thought after reading what you wrote.
You definitely take a buddy. I would think have a first aid kit, be first aid certified. That is definitely for sure. In I believe it was, gosh, 2017, 2016. It was pre-COVID, so it's all like blurred together now. We went down to the coast in Alabama, and I was a dive safety officer at the time, so I went diving with my husband. We're both certified, and we went on a lionfish hunt. And we dove the Lulu, and we were down at about 80 feet. I got two lionfish. They're an invasive species. I don't usually go out like hunting or fishing for things, but I don't feel as bad because a lionfish will literally eat anything that'll fit in its mouth.
Oh
And they're
my
not
gosh.
native to Florida. Are literally decimating um, the native fish populations. So we were able to get some lionfish. We get back up on the boat, and they're cooking it up in ceviche. Like they put lime juice on it, and it kind of cooks it up a little bit. And my husband was just talking about that the other day. He loves it.
Ah,
And we get back to the car, and we're getting our lionfish because we put them all together in a cooler on the boat on ice so they stay fresh. And then when we're taking him out of the cooler, he just reaches in and grabs them. Well, if
oh,
you're familiar with lionfish, they have those big, pretty fins, and they have a bunch of spines on the end of them. So when he reached in to grab this dead lionfish, he poked his finger,
oh my gosh.
and they are venomous. And the venom does start to get a little bit weakened after they've passed. He did have some reaction. I was able to put his hand in some hot water, and he's like, it wasn't that bad. It's like a tiny little prick. He was fine. So I'm messaging my family back at home in the beach house. Like, haha, guess what just happened to Jack? And, I'm trained to
Yes.
do this because I work at an aquarium and, this is what I've trained for. And I'm like, you tell him the story. And then my brother is like, well, I just got stung by a stingray.
What? Oh my gosh. Jeez.
So he's a fisherman and he didn't mean to catch the stingray and it was on his hook. And he's like, well, how do I get it? And he got it off the hook and everything, but not without getting a sting to the leg.
Oh my
And that
gosh.
was much worse than the lionfish. And I'm like, I literally just got done doing an emergency training at work. And because we have stingrays at work and, the protocol and how to do all that. And I felt so guilty for not being there for my brother, but, I was there for my husband. So in the same trip,
Oh no.
we went parasailing. And while my brother and his wife were up in the air, we're on the boat and it starts smoking. And we're like, what's going on?
Oh, yeah.
And my brother apparently at the same time is looking at his wife and his wife's looking at him and she's like, is the boat on fire?
Right. Yeah, exactly.
And
And
he's like, yep. And she's like, well, what do we do? And
yeah.
he's like, well, if they start reeling us in and it's really bad, I'm going to cut us off this boat. And
Oh
she's
my
like, but then we're in the water. And
right.
she's afraid of sharks and what could happen and things like that. And he's like, well, it's better than being on a boat with fire. So it wasn't all in all, the fire wasn't that bad. They were able to get back on. They turned the engine off, was able to get the fire out. And we just waited around for another boat to come and pick us up. And we were just swimming in the water until that happened. So that's, a pretty fun and eventful
Yes.
trip all in all. And then our first trip again after COVID, it's in 2021, we went to Florida and I had already quit from my job at the aquarium. And fun fact, while I was diving in the tank with the sharks, talking to guests about sharks, my favorite fact was always, you're more likely to get struck by lightning than you are to ever get bit by a shark. I used to say this multiple times in a
Oh
week
my gosh.
for
Yeah.
years and years and years. So I quit the aquarium, go on my first beach vacation since COVID, and there's a storm rolling in. And I've got my nephew and dog out with me, dog nephew. Uh,
Yeah.
so Royce, who was itty bitty, and then the French bulldog. So I bring both of them in, and my husband was just cleaning up outside and then he sits down and he's just enjoying the beach while there's thunder and lightning
Yeah.
going off
Oh
around,
no.
impending storm. And I'm like, no, I'm going to go outside and get him. I'm going to help him bring the rest of the stuff in and whatever. So I remember walking up from where the waves were coming in, and there was a bright flash, bright as I've ever seen, and a spark came out of my foot, and we both fall to the ground.
Oh my gosh.
So it was a ground strike. It wasn't like a bad strike, but it was still scary enough. To this day, I still kind of have like a tingling in my right foot from where that happened. And it could have been a lot worse. My
Oh
husband said
yeah.
it felt like an electric shock for him. Like all the hairs stood up on
Right.
and him and everything. So I just immediately ran inside. And my sister-in-law was like, did you see that giant strike of lightning? I was like, see it, I felt it.
Yeah, you're like, that was me. Yeah, that was like, oh
That
no.
was it was like that scene in Home Alone where the guy
Right.
gets like
Yes.
electrocuted. So that's not stopped us from vacationing. Although something weird always happens. Like we've seen a bunch of water spouts a couple years ago.
Oh my
This
god.
last trip, what happened? The beach house, it was storming and there was a flood coming in the kitchen. So
Oh
just
no. Right.
water coming down. So literally it's always something crazy. And it's like I can go months and months at home and nothing crazy happens. I leave the confines of my home and we have some sort of crazy adventure.
That is crazy. And if we get hit by lightning out there on the beach like that, oh my goodness.
Yeah, it was pretty scary. I did not go to the hospital. I probably should have because it was still we spent a year at home. My son was doing school online because he's got asthma. So I was very much we're going to be isolated. And still at the time, I'm like, I know we're on vacation, but we're just at a beach house. I don't
Yeah.
want to risk exposing us at a hospital. I'm like, if I drop dead, take me somewhere, or if I have any weird symptoms. But so the whole rest of the night, like at dinner and stuff, my mom's just like staring at me like, is she doing anything weird?
Yeah,
I was drinking a
exactly.
couple drinks, and I was stuttering my words. I'm like, is she feeling okay?
Did it leave a mark like on your foot then too, or?
I really wish it did.
Yeah, yeah, you want that little singed black spot so you can point to it.
Yeah, some people have some really cool marks from where they got hit by
Yeah.
lightning. On the year anniversary, I did end up getting a lightning tattoo on my wrist, just because it's a permanent reminder for me that, like, literally something could fall from the sky without warning. I mean, I guess there's a warning. There was a storm coming in,
Yeah,
but you don't think you're going to get struck by lightning.
right.
Something could happen at any time. So if there is something you want to do, something you're passionate about, like, don't wait, just go do it.
Oh, I agree. I so agree. And if you have like a fear or something, you kind of have to weigh like, you know what, do I want to sit around and let my life pass by, or do I want to overcome this obstacle to do X, Y, or Z because I really need to do it?
Yeah.
Yeah. Because you could,
Absolutely.
like you said, you could just be walk out your door and the lightning bolt out of nowhere. I mean,
Yeah, absolutely. And sometimes those butterflies in my stomach, like if I'm nervous about something, sometimes that's like, oh, I'm alive. Like, I'm feeling some sort of emotion. And is this really scary, or am I like excited about it?
yeah. Oh, yeah. That's incredible.
So,
So go back a little to the nature workbook journaling. What are some tools if someone's curious about starting to do it? Are there some resources or tips for them? Because you know how some people are like, they just don't know where to start.
yeah, that is a really hard thing, is starting and just staring at a blank page. On my podcast, I interviewed Claire Leslie Walker, and she's been doing nature journaling since the 70s.
Oh, wow.
Written several books. I think she's on book 15 or 16 on the subject. And she's like, just start with a date. So that's all you need to do to get started, is start with a date. All you need is a piece of paper and a pencil. Of course, there are other things you can bring with you if you want to start getting more in depth. Like, I love doing a watercolor, for instance. Some people do colored pencils or markers. So it all depends on what medium that you enjoy playing with. And what's going to be best is what you're going to actually pick up and do. Um, I find if I get a special journal, then sometimes I won't use it because I'm like, oh, I spent too much money on it. I don't want to
Yes.
start using it. So I've literally just taken pages and I will hole punch them and put them in a binder.
Oh,
And if I
that's
don't like
smart.
that page, I don't have to use it, or you can rearrange it however you like. Um, just getting started in writing something. It could be how you feel at the moment. It could be what the temperature is. It can be what the sky looks like. Whatever's interesting you at that moment. There's literally no right or wrong way. People can do mapping. They can kind of in their mind, like, what does the musical notes of what this bird song would look like? I'm not musical, so I would have no idea. But
Right.
if that's what somebody's interested in, that's what you can do. Last year, for instance, it was around this time of year, and I was interested in, how are these different leaves in my backyard, how are they going to look? So I did,
Oh.
actually, I've got it right here with me.
Oh, how cool.
So I did how they were looking in the summertime, and then how they looked in the fall and how they changed. And it was a really fun experiment to do. And because I did that, I was able to tell, oh, I've got little baby maples growing in my front yard.
Right.
We had gardeners coming in just a couple weeks ago, and I'm like, I can't let these little saplings die. They're so adorable, and they're a native species. I don't want
Right.
to go to waste. So I was able to dig them up out of my garden, and I took them to a local conservancy and planted them out in the woods there, and helping to make some of those trees thrive, because they will go in and remove some of the honeysuckles and some of the more invasive species.
Oh, I
So
think that's amazing. That's so cool.
yeah.
And I like how you just focused on the leaves. Like it doesn't have to be, I think sometimes the whole idea of sitting outside and you see someone that's really talented, like the whole scene is kind of overwhelming and then you just sit there staring at that white paper.
Yeah, well, what really got me involved in nature journaling to begin with was during 2020. And we went camping for a week. It wasn't supposed to be, but we are having so much fun. We're like, we got nowhere else to be. We're
Yeah.
gonna do another day at Red River Gorge. Why not another day? And I had this new journal that I had bought, and I was sitting on this ledge looking out, and it was a beautiful sunset, and it literally looks like a bunch of scribbles on a page.
Oh.
But I know, looking back a couple years later, I was like, I remember I was drinking an ale 8, and I remember the beautiful colors in the sunset, and I remember how warm the sandstone felt beneath me and how gritty it was. It was like I was able to lock on to that memory just from a couple squiggles on a page. And that's what really got me excited about doing more and more nature journaling. So it doesn't have to be anything big and grand. I think a lot of times people think, oh, I need to connect with nature. I need these fancy shoes and these poles and all this fancy gear. Like literally just look outside. It's as simple as that.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. But I did like how in the pre-interview you listed some really interesting travel items that you travel with. Can you share a little bit? I think one of them's like a gravel blanket or something.
Yes, I love my gravel blanket. So my normal blanket that I use at home is a rumble blanket, something like that. It's like a puffy blanket and it
Yeah.
has a certain feel to it. It almost feels like a camping sleeping bag. And when I bought the gravel one, it has a very similar feel and it packs down to about that big.
Oh, really?
Yeah, but it's supposed to keep you warm from like to like 60 degrees or something like that. So if I'm in a hotel, that's all I really need extra is a tiny little blanket. And it kind of reminds me of home. It feels like home. And it also folds up in itself in a little zipper area, and you can make it a pillow if you want. But I also carry a blow up beach pillow too,
Oh,
because
okay.
you never know with hotel pillows. Sometimes you're
I
like
know.
sitting at a 90-degree angle or it's nothing. So I like to have that little extra comforts of home.
No, I like that too because a lot of hotels, I was recently traveling in Europe, and the craziest thing, it was like they didn't have a sheet in a blanket. It went right from like the stretched sheet to like a big old comforter or something. I'm like, there's like, this isn't
No
quite
in between.
right. Yeah, I need the in between. And you need some of those things. Honestly, it helps you. If you don't sleep well, now you're not rested for the next day.
Yeah, absolutely. The other kind of weird thing that I keep is it's a camp laundry bag. So it's a dry bag, but on the inside of it, it's got little rubber nubbies in it because I'm the type of person that will pack a million pairs of underwear. And I'm like, but why? I don't need all that.
Right. Yeah.
So like it's a mental game for me. Like, if you need to use this little camp, uh, and it folds down real tight and you have these little sheets that go in to help you clean. Or if I get a stain on my shirt, because I don't want to pack like 5 million shirts, I can just throw it in this bag real quick. You rub the sides together that have little rubber nubbies, and then you just rinse it off in your sink. I had to use it, I think, with my swimsuit because I got like fish on it or something from the
Oh,
beach
yeah.
when my brother was fishing, and I'm like, okay, I'm clean it real quick, and it was fine. Because I really try and pare down instead of bringing everything. I'll still bring everything, just kind of mini form. Like
Yeah.
I have a hair dryer that's itty bitty too that I found on Amazon,
Oh,
and it works
really?
great.
Oh, that's perfect.
Yeah.
But I'm like you too. It's like with the airlines, restricting how much you can bring, or if you want to grab one of the cheaper flights, like on Frontier or something. I mean, they charge you for everything, and you honestly, I always feel like most places you're going to, they're going to have a store. So if you really needed something,
Yes, exactly. And I've had my luggage lost on me before, so I tend not to check my bags anymore. I'll just throw it in the overhead if I can. Sometimes I know they overpack the plane and they make you put it under anyway, but yeah.
so you mentioned earlier that you use the Sony camera. Is that the only camera that you're using currently, or do you have other cameras that you enjoy using?
It's currently the Sony is my favorite. I do have a Nikon, and that was from my dad. The only downside with that one, I mean, it compacts pretty small and it can zoom in really far. Like I posted a picture of a snowy owl and online, and somebody got angry at me because I was standing too close. And I was like, the zoom on the Nikon 900 is insane. Like I was able to get a picture of the moon and you can see craters of the moon. I'm like, so was I standing too close to the moon?
Right.
Like,
Yeah, exactly.
so The only downfall with that one is it doesn't save the pictures to RAW file, and
Oh,
when I'm trying to submit photos for photography contests, they usually need the RAW file.
yeah, that's true. Yeah, the Sonys are nice because they have a lot more range at night too. The speeds and the ISOs are pretty nice.
What do you shoot with?
Oh, I've got a Sony, the A6000, which is kind of it was the basic level, but the reason it kind of drew me to it was because um, when I wanted to shoot the Northern Lights up in Alaska, that's what they were using. And the Canon didn't quite have that, fast ISO and stuff. And the Sony is it's so small. If you're doing street photography too, it's not as noticeable, it's not as like not everyone's going to turn around and stare at you like.
Yeah. Yeah, cool.
Yeah. So did you see the Northern Lights a few months ago? I think it was March or April that all of a sudden my phone was blowing up and I was nowhere near somewhere where it was still quite a ways out. But
I was out of town that day in, where were we? Lexington for a race. So my mom and I every year we do a little girls trip and we do the Run the Bluegrass race. And it was kind of a weird event because it takes place at the racetrack, but it's under construction, so they had to move it. And it just wasn't the same experience. It was kind of a bummer. And then my phone is blowing up
right.
that there's Northern Lights, and I'm like looking outside, but I'm in downtown Lexington. The light pollution was horrible, so I didn't see it. But my husband was home, and he was actually able to throw the drone up in the air and get some pictures from the sky. So that was really neat.
Oh, that's really amazing. Yeah. Because I had a friend all the way down. She's in Oklahoma, and just the way it happened that night, she was getting some amazing, just the colors and the intensity. And I was just like, oh, I wish I could have seen it.
So jealous. Did you see the solar eclipse?
No, I did not.
Oh my gosh, if you ever get the chance to see a total solar eclipse, highly recommend. It sounds so cheesy. It was a life-changing experience, and it was just like a couple minutes. So we went up above Columbus area, and we did a Jeep clips is what it's called. So
Oh,
I've got a Jeep Wrangler and I'm part of a Jeep group, and we did a ride and we went through a couple covered bridges on our ride
oh,
during the
nice.
day, which was really cool to see. And we saw a water mill, so saw some history there. And then the next day we met at this woman's farm and saw the eclipse. And right up until totality, I'm like, why did I drive all the way up here? This is just like any other eclipse that I've seen. But as soon as it was totality, it was like a 360 sunset.
Oh my
It
gosh.
got noticeably cooler. And the corona, which is what
Yeah.
it's called, coming out, the rays and stuff coming out from behind the moon, was just incredible to watch. And you don't have to use or you can't use your solar eclipse glasses at that time because you wouldn't be able to see it. So you have to take your glasses off, and like literally the second that the sun peeps behind the moon again, you have to put them back on. It is just blinding bright. And it was so amazing to see. I really want to see it when it comes out to Spain in a couple years.
Yeah. Oh, that should be amazing. And did
Yeah.
it get just like totally quiet too? Because you would think the birds and just that nature.
So I thought it was at the time, and then when I was listening to the video later on, you can still hear some birds in the background. So I just don't know if we were so engrossed in the moment and just in awe that we didn't hear everything else going on behind us, but we did get some sparrows and stuff on the footage.
Oh, neat. Oh, that's so amazing.
Yeah, it was
So
so cool.
incredible. Well, I love everything you're doing. This is so inspiring, Lauren. So, where can people find out more if they want to take one of your classes, if they want to reach out to you, where should they find you?
Yeah, so my website is www.wilddevelopmentsstudio.com, and I'm most active over on Instagram, and that's at Wild Development Studio. And for our drone stuff, that's jlaerialviews.com.
Nice. So, you have anything coming up you want to plug?
Oh gosh. I mean, if you are local to the Loveland, Ohio area, definitely check me out in the and also at Hometown Cafe. I've got a couple watercolor classes where I'm teaching people how to paint their pet. And
Oh,
if you're interested in doing some nature journaling experiences, I've got some dates coming up for that as well, but that is on the website.
Awesome. Well, I'll put those in the show notes too, so people can look them up. And if they happen to be out in the area and want to join you, they can sign up. Thank
Awesome.
you
Thank you.
so much, Lauren. This has been so much fun.
Yeah, thank you, April.